All right, welcome to Hairy Matters episode 6. I'm your host, the world's greatest moderator, Averbs123. I'm joined here by Patches O'Houlihan, also known as Andy One from the smallest living room in the West Village. How are you doing over there?
Good, I'm good. Just trying to solve hair loss and fully verticalize the pharma industry.
That's so noble, so noble.
Yeah, someone's got to pay for that living room. Is that real?
This is a green screen. I'm using a green screen. So we're joined live. Well, not live. This is pre-recorded, but we're joined by the team from HairClone. First up, we have Dr. Paul Kemp, who is the HairClone CEO, and Dr. Jennifer Dillon, HairClone's head of research. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Really excited to have you on.
Thanks for having us.
So first, Jennifer, I think it might be kind of cool to just talk a little bit about how we got in touch in the first place. I think it's kind of a cool story, at least from my perspective. I know one of our community members, he goes by Davi Boy in the Discord. You may know him as something else. I think he spoke to you at an event or something. Do you remember what happened?
I don't remember that part. I remember receiving an email from you and thinking, because we get a lot of random emails, to be quite honest, and thinking, okay, this looks a bit different. And we spoke about it as a group, and then we were putting feelers out. I think one of the directors was speaking to Ralph about it, and then next thing is you published that video, the 80s themed video, and we're like, oh, hair dye, yeah. Sparked our memory really, and I looked into it again and got in touch, and then that's when we first spoke. Can't remember if I spoke to someone at a conference or not, but that could have also happened.
Maybe, and I do have to ask, because obviously there are several more traditional, I guess, companies in the space. What was your sort of first impression when you heard about hair dye? Were you like, what the hell is this? Is this a made up group of guys online? What were you thinking?
I'm not sure I understood it well enough to really have that much of an opinion, but it was certainly different. I actually thought you were kind of a group, or trying to get a group of researchers together to kind of oversee the direction of funds. So it wasn't too far off what you're doing, I suppose.
Yeah.
But the crypto side of things definitely threw me.
I remember when I saw your video on YouTube, the spoof bit at the front, at the start. I was watching that and thinking, oh no, here we go again. And then, it was really good because you got rid of the spoofing hype, overhype, and really like then, your ideas, how you were working it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So cool. Now that we've talked about us, I guess first, would love to talk now, get into HairClone, and Paul, sort of hear from your point of view or your perspective. What was the genesis story behind HairClone? How did this all come about?
It's a long one. It's about a 30-year story. So I spent 10 years in Boston developing a skin replacement that you mentioned has treated over 2 million people, a company called Organogenesis. And it was a really expensive and time-consuming construct. And I remember I was trying to improve the functionality of it by using growth factors, all sorts of things. And then I went to a McDonald's drive-through and fed the 60 trillion cells that I am for $5.50 or something, and thought, for cell replacement, the sooner we get it into the patient, the better. I went back from the States back to the UK and founded a company called Intercytex, and got to know Colin Yehoda. I'm not sure if you're aware of his work. He found maybe 40 years ago now that you could take dermal papilla cells, inject them into a mouse, and create brand new hair follicles. So that fit all my requirements, getting cells very simply into the patient, creating a new structure. So brand new hair formation was kind of one of our flagship products at Intercytex. And we did the world's first clinical trial using cells for hair regeneration with Dr. Besson Farjo and Nilofer Farjo, who were based in Manchester. And I was patient number 2 in the study. And we generated brand new hair follicles. Problem was, we generated brand new vellus hair follicles, just very fine ones. So scientifically great, but from a cosmetic point of view, it wasn't really sufficient. We sold that technology to Adoran's Research in the US, and they did some more advancements of it. They did more clinical trials. I think they treated over 100 patients, all with a view to creating brand new hair follicles. Because we were told at the time from hair transplant surgeons that there was never enough hair follicles to transplant because it's just a 1-for-1 transfer. So we were imagining patients who were kind of slick bald patients who had gone through the limits of hair transplantation and had nowhere else to go, and then we'd inject them with dermal papilla cells and they'd sprout new hair follicles. Neither Insicytex nor Adorans could do that sufficiently cosmetically, but what we both noticed was that miniaturizing follicles around the margins of this hair loss thickened up, and they thickened up for the length of follow-up of these trials, so over a year. And at the time, we just dismissed that because we were looking at making new hair follicles. Adorans closed down, and so there's a group of us, myself, the Farjos as clinicians, and staff from Adoran's Research, all thinking we nearly got something, but we didn't. And that all came together, and we created a team and created HairClone with a view to not create brand new hair follicles, but to rescue miniaturizing. So our intention is both rebuild miniaturizing hair follicles, but kind of more importantly, to reprogram them to not miniaturize anymore in the future. So we will be changing the fate of these follicles. And it kind of makes more sense from a consumer point of view. I know myself, when I first started to lose hair, I was doing my PhD in my early 20s, and it was kind of devastating at the time, but there was nothing you could do about it. It was just, hey ho, you go bald. And now I probably wouldn't change. I'm just used to looking like this, and I think if I suddenly look like you guys, people would think, next step is a Harley Davidson motorbike, and so the patient population we're looking for are people just beginning to lose hair, just beginning to be concerned about it. And the idea with the HairClone treatment, if it works, would be that we'd rebuild miniaturizing follicles as this wave of miniaturization progresses. So the patient would never change his appearance. I joke that our before and after pictures would look identical, except your face would get older rather than your hairline. You'd stay with a full head of hair through life. That's the intention.
Right. Okay, that was an excellent overview. I think we're definitely going to get more into sort of the dermal papilla cell therapy right after. I think maybe the next best thing to talk about would be sort of the split in your business lines between the follicle banking and then also the dermal papilla cell therapy, and would love to just hear a bit more how you both think about that, because I know one kind of feeds into the other, so that could be cool to hear about before we get into sort of the community questions about the therapy.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I joined after the follicle bank was set up, so we're all definitely best placed to talk about why we chose to do that.
Yeah, and it kind of relates back to the Insicytex days. So, as I mentioned, in Insicytex, we did clinical trials, and we didn't bank the follicles. So we would extract the follicles by FUE at the Farjo clinic. We'd ship them to the Insicytex lab. We'd dissect out the dermal papilla cells. We'd grow them up. We'd ship them back to the Farjo clinic, and they'd put them back in the patient. The problem with that was that a clock started. As soon as the patient's follicles were removed, we had to have a manufacturing facility ready to go. If there was any slip in the facility, it was closed down for whatever reason, and that was a problem. If the patient wasn't available at the end because they were ill or something, that was a problem too. So there was no way of stopping this clock once we'd taken the follicles out. So we were thinking if we did that again, we would freeze the follicles. And that would give us a chance then to, when the manufacturing facility is ready, we could thaw them out, culture them. So that was one reason. Another reason was because the HairClone route is to rebuild miniaturizing follicles rather than create brand new hair follicles in a slick bald patient. We'd envisage that we'd need to treat several times over the lifetime of the patient as this wave of miniaturization progresses. So rather than harvesting cells at every time of surgery, we would harvest cells once, and then we'd be able to treat multiple times. And then the third one was that we found out from the intercytex patients, because a lot of them were older patients, that the older the hairs, the slower they were to grow in culture, and the more difficult they were to grow in culture. So we thought if we can harvest hairs from young patients, then we stop the clock. So we kind of put those three together, and it led to hair banking. The other one was that these follicles remain the property of the patient, and someone else may come up with a better cell therapy solution than HairClone. And we've all, those patient hairs, they could use them for this other treatment if they wanted. So it was a way of, it's kind of analogous to cord blood banking, rather than you can bank the cells for a variety of treatments if you want.
Gotcha. Dax, did you have a question off of that?
Yeah, well, I was just curious. How long have you guys been? Because Jen, you said this was before you even arrived at HairClone. How long have you guys been doing it, and also just how many people are currently banking today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it started probably a week or two before I started, so not that long before. But since then, we've had around 200, a few more than 200 people banking the follicles. And we found that people bank for a number of different reasons, so obviously hair loss being one of them, but something we've touched upon, not today actually, but we bank other types of cells as well. It's not just the dermal papilla cells, so we bank about 20 different types of cell that are found in the follicle, and I've been trying to grow them out just to show that they're viable, and everyone I've tried to grow so far has been viable. So it's we've shown that it's a bank of tissue in general, not just dermal papilla cells, but there's numerous different cell types, bulge epithelial stem cells, and dermal sheath cells, melanocytes, all sorts of different cell types. So there's good reason to bank follicles, not just for hair loss, it would appear. And there's a lot of groups working on therapies using cells from the hair as well for non-hair related issues. So yeah, I would say the majority is the hair loss.
Yeah, Jen, and when you say grow them out, and when you're multiplying these cell groups in the lab, could you give people an idea of the scale that you're dealing with here? So how many cells do you start with, and then how many cells do you end up with typically?
Yeah, sure. So with the dermal papilla cells, I've been trying to grow lots of those. So from one follicle, you get around 1,000 dermal papilla cells, and I can grow about 1,000 times more from that. So 1 million cells from one follicle.
And each of the cells that you create are basic. There's no detectable difference from the original cell that was extracted from the follicle.
Not to look at, not morphologically. Obviously, when we get them from the follicle, they're in that little pouch, the dermal papilla pouch. But when they grow out, they look similar to when they're 3 passages down. So we try not to take them any further than that. Try and keep the passage number low. But we've been able to do that, and they look morphologically very similar. Obviously, there are changes going on, but
so this question is from Herbert. So again, shout out to Herbert. But so I guess what you're saying is that you at least now you're not seeing a massive decrease in the viability of the cells as they sort of progress farther from the original cell, if you will.
No. To be honest, they keep growing and growing until past P10. So you can passage them on 10 times before the viability decreases, or they slow down in growth really. what we have done is find a new way to grow the cells as well. So we're using a different culture method compared to what a lot of labs are using, and they do seem to grow a lot better, at least with my hands. This culture method does seem to be superior to the standard culture method, and they just grow better for longer.
One measure you can have is the population doubling times. How long does it take for the cells to double in number? And that stays pretty consistent. If you grew them out a long way, as Jennifer said, they start pooping out. But we don't go that anywhere near that far.
Right. Got you. And then I guess I think Max, actually you had one more question you wanted to ask about the markers.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking so I guess going a step back and looking at the process, a lot of our community will be familiar with cell culture. I'm curious how, because you guys probably use a different culture, right, than like what Andrew's been using at the PAS lab at the University of Miami, just to like maintain skin, right? How do you think about like optimizing the culture? Is there something that is like significantly different from the cultures that you guys are using to what you'd find at your normal hair or skin lab?
Well, it's funny because you can't really use the standard cell culture method in a manufacturing facility. You can't use anything that's non-human, like a non-human mammal product. You can't use, and that is what everybody uses in research labs around the world, really. So when we got to the manufacturing stage, we had to completely change what sort of culture method we were using. And I looked at probably 20 different methods of culturing, looking at oxygen levels, looking at various different serum, et cetera. And we found one that just works really, really well, and it's applicable to manufacturing for human use. So it's kind of a double win, really. But that necessity to change the culture practice has developed a better method, but it is different, and that's definitely top secret.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And so before we move on to sort of the cell therapy part of everything you guys are doing, say I would like to have my follicles banked. How do I do that? Take me through it. Like I've just noticed my hair is falling out, and I want to do something about it.
Sure. Well, you're in a good place. You're in Florida at the moment, aren't you? So you go to our website, look on there, see the closest clinic in our network. So we've got quite a few clinics in America, one in the UK, and you just need to contact them and arrange for hair follicles to be taken, really. So it's quite a simple procedure. FUE, 100 follicles taken, frozen down, and then shipped over to us in the UK. Some people choose to have it as part of a hair transplant, just take a few extra and freeze them down, but if you just wanted a few taken, that's also an option.
One little bit, they're taken, shipped, then frozen. They're not taken, frozen, then shipped.
Take it. Oh, okay. So and they're shipped before they're frozen. Okay, so and you got that's interesting. So have you run into any sort of problems with like the import export or I guess how long can they survive before they need to be frozen?
A week.
A week. Okay. All right.
So we just ship them by UPS, which is normally 2 days to the UK. There are sometimes delays by customs. It's held up by customs, but the vast majority of the time, it works fine.
Okay. Wow. That's cool to know. All right. So I think we can now move on to the actual cell therapy, which is what most people are most excited about. But I think the follicle banking, what you guys are doing is very cool, and just it's more broadly applicable to even to a wide range of treatments. So that's awesome. I guess the first place to start, and maybe Paul or Jennifer can take this one. You gave us a little bit of an overview at the start of what exactly the cell therapy is. Would love to hear where you guys are right now in the development of your procedure, and what the roadblocks are at this moment.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've spent 30 years now developing, kind of clinical grade cell culture versus, basic lab. And there's a whole slew of steps that you are needed to do by the regulators before they allow you to use cells in the clinic. So, as Jennifer said, step one was to come up with a method to culture the cells that was clinically applicable, so that all the reagents that you use are reagents that the regulators would be okay with using. So that was step one that Jennifer did here in Birmingham. Step two was to find a contract manufacturer who had a license to manufacture cells for human use. And there's one that we're working with in Newcastle, here in the UK, which is affiliated with the University of Newcastle. They've been doing human cell culture for a variety of applications like corneal replacements and so on. So we found them. Jennifer then had to do tech transfer with them, teach them how to isolate dermal papilla cells and how to culture them, but how to do that in a clean room, which is a much more involved process. As an example, she gave them a 2-page protocol on how to isolate dermal papilla cells, and it's now
72.
It's now a 72-page document because of all the steps required by the regulators. And this was all funded by a UK grant to do that tech transfer. And the intention of the grant is at the end of the grant, we would be ready to go into the clinic. We'd have all the steps ready. And we were ploughing along merrily through it, and then COVID hit. And the Newcastle facility closed down, the hospital had other things to do and to work on our project. And they were closed for about 18 months, or specifically working on COVID patients for about 18 months, and the grant ran out. The UK government extended the grant for a little bit, but they couldn't extend it indefinitely. So we didn't do the very last step, and the very last step was to do the quality control steps required to release these cells for clinical use. And there are 3 things you need to do for quality control for a regulated product. One is its identity. So do you have dermal papilla cells? Purity, is there anything else in there? And potency, are those dermal papilla cells doing what you want them to do? And we weren't able to do that because of COVID. And then the facility was further closed down because they were running clinical trials for a variety of other products, and they had to go through them. So they had a kind of backlog, and it all just accumulated. So what we need to do, and it's the one thing that's stopping us going into the clinic, is to get these quality control tests, these release tests, validated. And it's that one step.
Got you. And then sorry, just remind me how much is it going to cost to get the quality control test finished?
Well, we're looking for about 500,000 to not just do that quality control. So once we've done that, Newcastle can release cells, and we would use them under it's a unique regulation in the UK called specials. And I think it's really important to explain what happens in those, because I think not many people know about them. So in a clinical trial, there's 2 aspects to a clinical trial application. So if you've got an idea that you want to do a clinical trial, you go to the regulators and they ask you 3 questions. First one is, what are you going to use as the product for your clinical trial? Second is, what are you going to do with that product? And the third thing is, what are you going to measure as an outcome, from that? And those 3 are very tightly controlled. And if you want to change anything during that, it's very difficult. Often you have to go right back to the start, and then you've got to raise a whole lot of money to do a whole new clinical trial. In the UK, they have what's called specials, in which you still have to do the first thing. You have to explain to the regulators, what are you going to use? And you have to make it to a quality identical to the quality you use in a clinical trial. But the great thing is they don't control what you do with that product or what you measure from it. And that's left up to the clinician. So our plan is, once we've got these quality control tests, we would make 10, 20 batches of cells to treat patients. But we could use leading hair transplant clinicians to decide, do we do a lot of little injections? Do we do them deep? Do we do them shallow? Do we do them in combination with minoxidil, finasteride? That they can do whatever they want with this product. And we would provide those cells for free, and then clinicians could use it. Once we can't start seeing efficacy, like the best patients to treat are this, the best way to do it is this, we can then design a real clinical trial. So the 500K that we're looking for is to not just do the validation of the clinical trials, but to do that 10 to 20 batches to treat patients.
Very cool. And doctor, could you just go in briefly, just from the patient's perspective, how many times am I going into the doctor's office? What does it look like if you're a patient? What's the experience like?
Well, you go in once, as Jennifer mentioned, to get your follicles harvested. That'd take maybe an hour to harvest. Very simple procedure under local anesthetic. Follicles will be shipped to us. We grow the cells up. We freeze them down. When there's identification of miniaturizing follicles, we'd arrange to have some of the cells sent back. They'd be micro-injected into this region of miniaturization. We don't know, is it a lot of little injections or a few big ones, as I mentioned, but in either case, it's just a series of injections. I can't imagine even you need any anesthetic for that. And then the intention is these cells migrate to the follicle, they rebuild them, and they reprogram them to be DHT resistant. Then, another region of hair would start miniaturizing. And each patient's going to be losing hair at a different rate and in a different pattern, but you create this long-term relationship with your clinician. And you'd go back, we're imagining 2 or 3 treatments, each separated by 2 or 3 years, as this wave of miniaturizations occurring. But the analogy is, in some way, imagine dentistry. In the old days, you used to lose your teeth and you had dentures, and it was one procedure. And that's analogous to where kind of hair transplantation is at the moment. What we're intending is you create a lifelong relationship with your surgeon, like you do with your dentist. And there's fillings and crowns and bridges, and it's a gradual process.
Yeah, that's really funny actually that you draw the comparison to a dentist, because we actually always talk about sort of the parallels between like your oral hygiene and your hair, and the fact that there's all this stigma around sort of keeping your hair in your head, and nobody talks about people going in for braces, people going in to see their dentist every year, all of these things. And so it's not too far of a stretch to imagine a similar sort of stack or suite of solutions. You have your toothpaste, maybe that's the minoxidil you rub on your head in the morning. You have the dentist, maybe that's, in this case, going in to get your HairClone injections. From the patient perspective, and I guess we'll learn more about efficacy as time goes on, but the experience from the patient perspective sounds kind of similar to like PRP therapy. Now, I'm not comparing it to PRP therapy from efficacy standpoint, because I haven't had very great results when using sort of plasma-rich platelet therapy. But the experience of getting the injections in your scalp is pretty similar, right?
Yeah. And it would be at longer time spans between PRP, which is either monthly, 3 monthly gaps. We're imagining years between treatments.
Gotcha. Right. I don't even have to use anesthesia for the PRP shots. My doctor Sammer Jabber thinks I'm a bit of a psycho for that, but it is what it is. Okay, so I think I do have a question from the researcher at the top of our leaderboard, Jumpman, and I think ultimately this is the most important question probably regarding whether or not your therapy is really going to work well. And so what it really is how do you guys think about immune rejection from these? Obviously, they're your cells that you're re-injecting into the body. but also sort of just dermal papilla integration between the new cells and the old cells. And if anything, what evidence can you share that it's either going to work or not?
Yeah, okay. So for a start, they are autologous, not allogeneic, which means they're taken from the patient and put back into the same patient. And so immune rejection is very much, not an issue in that sense. We culture them in the lab very briefly, so we try and keep those numbers of passages, so the number of times you split on those cells, to a minimum, so they change as little as possible. And so they shouldn't change too much between taking them from the patient and putting them back in. And therefore, immune rejection, it's not too much of a worry for us, to be quite honest. Regarding how do we know, or what evidence do we have that this might work? There is animal work out there whereby they've shown homing of the dermal papilla cells to the follicles and then being incorporated into that follicle and reprogramming that hair into a thicker hair, for example. And we hope to use our own natural test that we're developing ourselves, whereby we can pluck hairs and look at the transcriptome, so the genes that are expressed in those hairs, and how they might change following treatment, to see whether we can make the signature of that hair more like a hair that's not going to miniaturize. So without going too complex, we've seen differences between hairs that are DHT resistant and those that are sensitive. And so we're trying to show that following therapy, that it's kind of a different market, because you can't label cells and inject them into humans and follow them in the same way you can a mouse. So it's kind of an alternative way to show more definitively it is actually doing something and not just, a transient stimulatory effect.
Well, what we did want to do is, we want to have something that's more long-lasting than something like PRP. We want something that is permanent. So the problem is, if you're designing a clinical trial with a permanent follow-up, you're never going to get it approved. So what we wanted to do was to have kind of a surrogate marker. How can we tell that these hairs are going to persist? And like Jennifer said, the idea is you can pluck a hair, and what Jennifer showed was that if you pluck a hair from a DHT-resistant region and look at the transcriptome of that hair, it's very different from a hair plucked from a region that will miniaturize in the future. So what we want to do is to, and the great thing about hairs is you can repluck the very same hair. So we want to pluck a hair, look at the transcriptome, treat it, let it grow again, and pluck it again, and ask the question: has it changed? Has it changed from a DHT sensitive follicle to a DHT insensitive follicle? If the answer to that is yes, then you could expect that it will persist through various hair cycles. It'll just keep growing.
Very cool. And this is a question from Herbert, who's another one of our top researchers. When are there any markers so far that you guys have seen, like when you're running that process of looking at these transcriptomes, like over and over again?
Well, we haven't done the, pluck, treat, pluck yet, but you can see different patterns between 3 different patterns. One is hairs that are DHT resistant. Second one is hairs that are DHT sensitive but not yet miniaturizing. And the third one is regions that are DHT sensitive and miniaturizing. And they are clearly different profiles. So, it could be a whole different product that we do, in that you could map your head. Take a few follicles from different regions, and you could say, well, we expect that in the future you could potentially use your hair back to here, or you're only going to lose a small amount of hair. But we haven't looked at changes post-treatment.
That could be a really cool product, actually.
Yeah,
it could be really fun.
And then just another question from Herbert actually as well. So say you have like DUPA or diffuse thinning, like my friend Patches O'Houlihan over here, and he's got sort of thin hair from the traditional donor area. Um, does that impact your treatment, do you think, or are you guys able to extract the hair follicles and sort of tell, like, this is a healthy follicle, this is a miniaturizing hair follicle, we might not want to use that one?
Yeah, well, as you know, we've got our clinical network, and they're a select group of clinics, so pretty much hand selected best of the best from around the world that have joined our clinical network. They're among the best surgeons, transplant surgeons in the world. So they are the best people to know whether it's a healthy follicle or not. So if you're going to see one of the clinics in the network, then they are best placed to be able to tell whether they're, which follicle they're taking and know that it is a good, healthy follicle. So I think you'd be in good hands knowing that the right one's being taken.
Very cool. Very cool. I think that explains all the science side really well. Maybe just getting to the business model really quickly. So is there a rough estimate yet for the price of the treatment? And then also maybe if you could get in like a potential path, if we would assume it's expensive at first, but is there a way to drive down cost at scale? How many customers would we need to scale this? Just getting into any sides of the business model that you guys find interesting.
All good questions, and we don't have real answers for any of them. Obviously, if this worked, and if it did what we, hoped it does, that you can treat a follicle and it never becomes miniaturizing ever again, the demand would be huge, and we would be limited by how many patients we could grow, isolate the dermal papilla cells and grow. So initially, obviously, our first patients would be the patients who've already banked, and then we'd be extending it beyond that. As to the cost, we don't know. We're imagining it's going to be kind of comparable to a hair transplantation, but even that is, how long is a piece of string? It can vary greatly. The big game is to increase the number of patients we could grow, and that would require automation. Jennifer can isolate dermal papilla cells now, but it's micro dissection under the microscope. Can't imagine doing that for millions of patients. So one of the things we're actively looking at is how can you automate that? And then, we're looking to, at the moment, there's about 500,000 hair transplants a year globally. So, if you just take that as a kind of the market you aim at, people who are concerned about the hair, although, I need to emphasize those are patients who've lost a lot of hair rather than patients who are beginning to lose hair. So it could be even greater than that number. So we don't know. We really don't know at this stage of the game how much it would cost, but we realize, in order to be a business, you've got to make a profit and treat patients. So it's a dynamic business model that we're looking at the moment.
Gotcha. And then I guess really the only other question for our hair hodlers to consider. So the investment opportunity that's available and which we'll hopefully propose to everybody is $500,000 is available at a $12 million valuation, I believe.
£12 million valuation.
£12 million. Okay, there we go. Gotcha. And that is, have you guys have raised before, or it was a grant to get you guys started?
No, we've got revenue from various sources. We've had multiple grants from the government, 3 so far. We have our clinical partner network, and they pay to be members of the network. And in return for that, we give them regional exclusivity when the treatment is available. So, a clinician would pay to have the regional exclusivity to a section of a city in the US, say. We also get revenue from banking. Patients who bank, and we put 100% of that revenue back into the research. And we have some angel investors, and some angel investors are clinicians who can see the potential of this. So we have had investments at the £12 million valuation.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so in this $500,000 round, I believe you guys have offered $200,000 to us, potentially was the ticket size.
You can have as big a slice as you want.
Okay, great.
Um,
Yeah, I think Andrew might have had some Wi-Fi problems, but just our last community question. This is from Indana. So this sounds like a great opportunity. I think a lot of people are really excited about it. The one thing, it's almost tricky to us because, like how the mind games kind of work. It's a relatively small amount, and like obviously you guys have a really impressive team, you two and the rest of the team, and obviously working on a problem that we all believe is a massive market. Why do you think it's been so hard to raise the capital that you're trying to raise right now?
well, we haven't tried really hard. We haven't tried really hard to raise the capital. I've spent all my career raising money. Raised, I wouldn't know, probably $100 million overall. And it's a time-consuming process, and it can be really distracting to the work of the business. So we have been working almost organically based on the revenues from clinical partners, the banking revenue.
As you were saying, so you, obviously you guys, like you're saying, so you're working as the revenue comes in. It's great that you guys have revenue already. We'd love to, I don't know if we have an NDA in place yet, but we'd love to get one under place and just look at what the actual numbers are today. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I don't know if you were talking about the fundraising process so far. Yeah, I mean, that's really about it.
There's kind of two types of investors. There's investors who have a personal interest in the outcome, like yourselves. And then there's investors who are pure financial investors, just looking at, how much money can my investment make to my investees. And the second group, it's really difficult because this Intercytex has tried cell therapy for hair loss, and Adirans has tried cell therapy for hair loss. Shiseido are trying it at the moment, and their results. If you look at their results, if you look at the numbers, average hair diameter is fairly flat. But if you look at the photos, they are also showing around the margins of the hair loss significant increases in thickness. But they are trying to make brand new hair follicles again. So it's the brand new hair follicle gang are kind of making it difficult to raise money when you're trying to say, we're not trying to create brand new hair follicles, we're trying to rescue your own hair follicles as they're miniaturizing. And it's very difficult to get that story over. When they look at before and after photos and say, well, there's not much difference there. And you need to look at just risk region. So what we want to do is have, some slam dunk definitive clinical observations linked in with changes in the transcriptome of plucked follicles, and then raise money at a higher valuation rather than trying to raise several million at this valuation.
Yeah. I don't know where, but yeah, I'm thinking too. Like, I don't know how big the market. This is just up. I don't know how big the market for exosomes are, but I would imagine that your therapy would at least be as effective as exosomes, which I know I like.
We're actually working. We've just got a new grant to look at exosomes because we're growing dermal papilla cells, which are producing spent media, which will contain exosomes. But what we're imagining is that those therapies will just be a transient stimulation. And, if you look at work Histogen did, they were kind of looking at spent media.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, it's really exciting what you guys are doing. I think there's a lot of excitement around it, and yeah, I think I think that this will be great for everyone to see. I think people will be really excited to hear it come from you guys. What's going on over there. So, thanks so much. Thanks so much for hopping on.
Thanks. Would
You're
you like
welcome.
to see the lab?
Oh, that'd be awesome.
And apologies for that. All the power just went out of my house all at once. So I'm assuming you guys had a great conversation for the 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, we're with Paul and Jennifer in the HairClone lab now. They're going to give us a quick tour, a quick spin around, and yeah, we're excited to see.
Right, so I have to be careful. There are a number of different companies that work in the same space, so I have to be careful not to share anything I shouldn't. So I'm just going to flip it around. Okay, so this is the entrance. So this has freezers, centrifuges. There's a room for radioactive work, microbiology. This is a minus 150 freezer, which is basically instead of liquid nitrogen storage, we have that here. We have this room, which is dedicated really to cell culture. Then it has the general cell culture things, microscope.
Is this where you spend most of your time? Which room are you spending most of your time in?
Yeah, I joke that this is my office because
yeah.
this is where I live. And also through here we have a bench over here for doing dissections and RNA extractions, just general lab work here. It's my good friend, the dissection microscope. So further down there's just more lab spaces for the various different companies. So they're all earmarked for the different labs. And then at the end, there's some more communal space with like balances, more centrifuges. There's one of the communal space we can show you. There's some ultra pure water.
There we go.
Always very useful. Ice machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then this is where my cells are kept. The incubator, 37 degrees.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a better microscope there for looking at the cells. There's all your glassware needs in here. Centrifuges again. All sorts of random things, not entirely sure what that is. Yeah, more cell culture hoods and RNA hoods.
And is there a big I think it's a carbon dioxide tank or a nitrogen tank for the incubator or no?
Yeah, there's the piping goes, so they are plugged in here, the gas cylinders, but the cylinders themselves, not entirely sure what they are, but we have lab management that look after that. So it's like a communal facility called the BioHub in Birmingham. It's run by the University of Birmingham. And so they lease out lab space to different companies, and you can rent bench by bench basically. And then they've got a team of lab management folks who look after all the nitty gritty parts. So then we can just get on with the research, which is so useful. So
that's really helpful.
Yeah, all the maintenance of the equipment and everything. And the beauty of being here as well is that it's connected to the university. So if you haven't got a piece of equipment here, you can go over to the university and use it there. They have a setup where you can do that. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. It works well.
Fantastic. And is there normally anybody else in the lab with you, or are you working there alone?
There's other people from different labs, usually just myself in the lab at the moment, but we have just taken on, someone's just about to start in the lab as well, so I won't be on my own so much anymore.
So you have a friend. That's good.
Yeah. We did have some interns over the summer as well, that was good. They were from the university because there's quite a close connection there, so yeah, it was handy.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you guys so much for giving us a tour, and thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with us. It's been really awesome hearing about what you guys are building over at HairClone, and so thank you again very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
All right.
All right. See ya.
Bye.